so listen closely. When darkness wraps the world and dreams begin to stir, you've arrived at the right place. Welcome to Between Dreams and Shadows, the sanctuary of stories that live between sleep and the unknown. Here, every tale is more than a story. It's a portal to hidden worlds, forgotten secrets, whispers from beyond, and shadows that speak as your eyes begin to close. If you're drawn to mysteries, haunting legends, and stories that send shivers down your spine, this channel is your new nighttime ritual. Before we begin, I invite you to become part of this growing nightbound community. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale. New stories drop regularly, always under the veil of night. Like this video if you enjoy that chill before sleep. It helps this channel grow and lets me bring you deeper, darker stories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a strange dream or felt something watching in the dark? Your experience might inspire the next tale now. Take a deep breath, turn off the lights, leave the world behind, and get ready to drift. Between dreams and shadows, I found a diary that should have stayed buried. Night always had a strange way of making everything seem different. Shadows stretched longer, the wind whispered softer, and even the silence carried weight like something unseen was listening. My name is Daniel. I never believed in curses. Not until the day I unearthed the diary. It all started a week ago, when I visited my late grandfather's abandoned cabin, deep in the woods. It had been left untouched for over 30 years, gathering dust and swallowing secrets that no one cared to uncover. The place was a relic of a forgotten, time-weathered wooden walls, crooked floors, and windows that groaned against the wind as if trying to speak. I wasn't there to find anything valuable. I only wanted to retrieve an old clock my mother had once cherished. But the moment I stepped onto that creaking porch, something felt wrong. It wasn't the kind of wrong you can easily explain. It was quieter than it should have been. No chirping insects, no rustling leaves, just a hollow silence that pressed against my skin like cold hands. The air felt heavier with every step inside. Dust floated lazily in the single beam of moonlight, seeping through a crack in the window. Old furniture stood like silhouettes, frozen witnesses to forgotten conversations. As I explored, my boots scraped against the floor, echoing louder than they should in such a small space. Then, I noticed it. A loose plank beneath the worn rug near the fireplace. It wasn't aligned like the others. Instinctively, I knelt and pulled it up, half expecting to find nothing, maybe a stash of old coins or useless junk. But instead, there it was. A leather-bound diary, brittle and discolored with age. Its cover had deep scratches, if someone, or something, had tried desperately to destroy it, but failed. Faded, yet still legible, were words burned into the leather. Do not open. My hands trembled, not because I believed in the warning, but because something about it felt personal, as though it wasn't written for just anyone. It was meant for whoever found it here, me. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, tighter. The wind outside seemed to hush even further, as if nature itself was waiting, watching. I shouldn't have opened it. I really shouldn't have. The first signs of disturbance the moment I cracked the diary open. A stale, bitter smell seeped into the air like something long dead had been disturbed. Its pages were stiff, yellowed, and wrinkled, yet somehow still intact. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, almost frantic. As I flipped through, the words felt less like journal entries and more like warnings, rambling descriptions of something that stalked, that lingered, that watched. It lives beneath the silence. It feeds on attention. It never leaves once you know it's there. The sentences blurred in my head. Some lines were crossed out violently, others written over and over again, until the paper tore. The further I read, the more the air itself seemed to shift heavier, denser, as though the cabin was shrinking around me. Then I heard it. A subtle, barely noticeable scrape. Not outside, not above, from inside the cabin. Behind me, I froze, listening, telling myself it was just the wood settling, or maybe an old mouse skittering through forgotten holes. But deep down, I knew better. I turned slowly. Nothing, just the dusty furniture and the pale light of the moon. But something had changed. The chair by the window, it wasn't facing the window anymore. It was turned, slightly angled towards me. Did I bump it? Did I move it without noticing? I told myself yes. I told myself anything to keep the fear at bay. But the second I tried convincing myself, thud, a single, soft thud, came from the corner behind the fireplace. Not loud, not aggressive, almost cautious, like the sound someone makes when accidentally knocking something over, but carefully, deliberately. I walked over, my steps heavier now, heart racing against my ribs. My eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, but again, nothing. And yet, when I turned back toward the diary, the rug I had pulled aside earlier was no longer bunched up. It was back in place, perfectly flattened, covering the hole as if it had never been moved. My breathing hitched. I hadn't done that. I knew I hadn't. A sickening realization started to root itself deep in my chest. This wasn't a prank of my own mind. Something in this cabin wasn't just present. It was aware, but as much as every fiber of me screamed to leave, something stronger anchored me. A gnawing curiosity, a dread-filled need to understand what this diary really was, and why it had been buried. And then, the shadows shifted, just a little. Just enough that I knew I hadn't imagined it. The sound that shouldn't exist, the air had changed. It wasn't just heavy now, it was alive, vibrating with something unseen, something that didn't belong to the world I knew. At first it was subtle, a faint hum, low, persistent, barely audible. It was the kind of sound you don't hear with your ears, but rather feel in your bones, a vibration, crawling beneath the surface of everything. I stood perfectly still, holding my breath, straining to listen. Hum, click, hum, click. It came in intervals, mechanical yet organic, as though it wasn't meant to be heard. But now it was, leaking into my reality by mistake. Then came the whisper, soft, broken, fragmented words, like someone trying to speak through water roar from the wrong side of existence. He shouldn't see. My spine stiffened. The voice was behind me. No, above me, or maybe inside me. It wasn't anchored to any direction. It floated in the air like smoke, surrounding me completely. Dot put it back. I spun around, scanning every inch of the room. Nothing. No one. Only shadows, trembling ever so slightly at the edges of the walls. Then, the sound of something dragging Dot slow, heavy, scraping across wood from the back room, the one my grandfather always kept locked. Except now, the door wasn't locked. It stood slightly ajar. A black slit, splitting the wall like a wound. The hum grew louder. The dragging stopped. Silence. But not the peaceful kind. It was a suffocating silence, the kind that screams without sound. My instincts begged me to leave, to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Whether it was fear or curiosity, I didn't know anymore. And then, tap, tap, tap. A single knock echoed from inside the diary itself. I stared at it, lying open on the floor where I had dropped it moments earlier. Its pages trembled, not from wind. There was no wind. The whisper returned, closer, sharper, words forming with chilling clarity. You opened the door. Every hair on my body stood on end. My pulse thundered in my ears. Something was aware of me now, something that shouldn't be. A question clawed its way into my mind, welcome, but relentless. Had I really found this diary, or had it found me? The presence without a face stood paralyzed, staring at the trembling pages of the diary. My breath came shallow, uneven. The knock. It had come from inside the book. I knelt slowly, unsure whether my hands were shaking from cold or terror. But before I could touch it again, something moved. Not seen, felt. A shift in the air behind me, as if the weight of someone standing inches from my back, distorted the atmosphere itself. You know that sensation? When someone enters your personal space, the warmth of a presence, the subtle shift in pressure. Only this wasn't warm. This was hollow, empty. I spun around. Nothing. Only the chair, facing me again. Closer now. My eyes darted to the back room door, still ajar. The darkness inside looked thicker than it should. Not just the absence of light, but a presence, a substance, like the dark itself was watching. Then, something small rolled across the floor. A marble. I watched it trace a slow, perfect circle, before stopping at my foot. I hadn't seen a marble in years. There was no reason it should be here. Another sound, a whisper of movement. I snapped my gaze to the shelf. A small porcelain figurine, one I hadn't noticed before, was turned backwards. Its face now, facing the wall, as if it refused to witness what was about to happen. I felt the weight of eyes on me. Not too many. Not looking from a distance, but from everywhere. From nowhere. My skin crawled. A chill crawled up my spine like icy fingers tracing each vertebra. The silence was no longer empty, it was dense, saturated. And then, the light bulb above flickered once, twice, then went dark. I stood in complete blackness. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. The screen lit up, weak, shaking in my grip. In the dim glow, I caught something. A reflection, on the glass of the window behind me. A shape, not a person, not an animal, just a silhouette, wrong, bent, crawling, staring. When I whipped around, nothing, but the cold remained, the weight remained. The diary's pages flipped wildly on their own, stopping abruptly on a single entry. The words were messy, scrawled so hard that the ink bled through the paper. If you feel it, it's already too late. My throat tightened. A sound, soft as breath, drifted into my ear. Double quotes, Dan. Single quotes, TA ... around. I couldn't. Because even though I saw nothing, every fiber of my being knew I was not alone. The unspoken warning. I stayed frozen, perfectly still. I didn't dare move. Not an inch. The voice, the presence, it was right there. Close enough that I could feel the faint disturbance of the air. Then something strange happened. The tension didn't grow. It settled. Not because it left. No. It settled because whatever it was had decided I wasn't going anywhere. It no longer needed to chase me. It had me exactly where it wanted. I glanced down at the diary. The page had changed. I hadn't touched it. But the entry was different now. Handwriting messier. Darker, as though written in a frenzy, or by trembling hands. It marks those who read. It follows until you forget, but you won't. Below that, a symbol, roughly sketched. A circle with 7 jagged lines cutting through it, like fractures in glass. The longer I stared at it, the more it seemed to subtly move. Not on the page, but in my mind. And that's when I realized, ... the disturbances, the sounds, the movement, the voice, they weren't random. They were steps, a process, a ritual. I scanned the room again, this time with a sharper eye, and that's when I noticed the pattern. The chair had moved 3 times. The marble had rolled in a perfect circle. The porcelain figure had turned exactly 180 degrees. Nothing here was by accident. These were signals, warnings, or worse, preparations. The hum returned, deeper this time, resonating through the floor, the walls, my ribs. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was a pulse. Click, 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 The back room door creaked further open. I swear, the dark behind that door was no longer just absence, it was a shape, slow, breathing, and then, the most horrifying sound yet, a breath, long, wet, close, not from the room, not from the walls, from the phone in my hand. I yanked it away from my ear as static bled through the speaker, followed by a whisper that wasn't a voice, but more like thoughts shoved into my head. You should not have opened the door And then the static cut. I squeezed the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. My hands were damp, freezing. The message was clear. This presence didn't want me to leave. But not because it wanted me here. No, it needed me here. The diary trembled again. Another page turned. More frantic scribbles appeared this time. Not in ink, but in something darker. If it lets you go, it's not mercy. It's because it wants to follow. A dry gasp escaped my lips as the realization hit. Even if I ran, even if I burned this place to the ground, this wouldn't end here. The moment of truth. Every instinct inside me screamed to run, to get out, to leave everything behind: the diary, the cabin, this suffocating darkness that felt stitched into my very skin. But a cruel thought gnawed at me, louder than even my terror. If I leave now, will it leave with me? The diary trembled again, pages flipping wildly as if some unseen force grew impatient. The backroom door was now fully open. Inside, nothing but shadow, thick, pressing, alive. I stepped backward, just once, a single, shaky step toward the exit. The floor beneath my foot groaned, but not from my weight. No, it was deeper than that. It was as if the house itself shifted in disapproval. That's when I noticed. The air itself was changing. The stillness wasn't just heavy, it was pulling. The shadows stretched unnaturally toward me, thin tendrils of darkness crawling along the floorboards like liquid smoke. Slow at first, then faster, hungry, reaching. I grabbed the diary, not because I wanted to, but because some part of me understood. Leaving it here wouldn't change anything anymore. And as my fingers touched the worn leather cover, another voice emerged. Not whispered this time, not distant. It was clear, close, right next to my ear. Decide. That single word shattered whatever illusion of safety I still clung to. Leave, or go deeper, run, or face it. My gaze shifted toward the back room. Something was in there, not hiding, waiting. As if this entire sequence of events was designed step by step to lure me toward that door, toward the answer. And yet, the front door stood barely open, just a crack, enough to remind me that the outside world still existed beyond this nightmare. The humming grew sharper, vibrating the wooden floor beneath my feet. The symbol on the diary pulsed, glowing faintly like embers hiding beneath ash. I tightened my grip, heart hammering against my ribs. This isn't just a haunting. I whispered to no one. It's a choice. Behind me, the softest sound, like fingers brushing against wood, like nails, gently tracing the frame of the door. Come see, The voice lilted, soft, hypnotic, neither threat nor plea, just invitation. The air pressed tighter. My throat tightened. If I chose to open that door fully, would I finally understand what this thing was? Or would it consume me completely? Either way, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. There was no returning to the person I was before tonight. The inevitability of darkness. My hand hovered at the doorframe of the back room. It was strange how quiet everything had become. Not silent in the normal sense, but hollow, as if the world itself had pressed pause. No wind, no creaking floors, no whispers, just anticipation. I pushed the door fully open. It didn't resist, but it didn't welcome me either. The hinges released a low groan that felt more like a sigh than a sound. Inside, there was nothing, just emptiness. Four walls swallowed in a darkness so absolute, it devoured the weak glow of my phone screen. The light simply stopped, as if something in there refused to let it exist. But the feeling, oh God, the feeling was suffocating. I wasn't alone in that room. I wasn't even one among others. I was surrounded. Shapes shifted in the corners of my vision. forms that weren't fully formed, faces that never finished becoming faces, twisted outlines of things that had tried and failed to look human. I stepped in, one foot, then another. My breath trembled, and then the walls breathed back. The darkness moved, not like air, not like smoke, but like something organic, dense, deliberate, surrounding me, pressing in. A low chorus of voices rose from every direction, not speaking words, not quite, just sounds, fragmented echoes of broken languages, forgotten cries, and unfinished screams. In the center of the room, something waited, a shape, round, buried beneath layers of rotted cloth, a mound of something. My hands moved before my brain agreed, peeling the fabric back. Slowly. The diary, another one, but older, smaller, bound in something that didn't feel like leather. It felt, wrong, damp, cold, as if it was still, alive. Carved onto its surface was the same symbol, the fractured circle, only this one wasn't drawn. It was burned into the material, deep, blackened, still warm. As my fingers brushed it, everything shifted. The room blinked, nor reversed. Time snapped backward for a heartbeat, the air folding in on itself. And then, a figure. Not fully seen, not fully real, a silhouette of stitched shadows and stretched limbs. No face, just folds where a face should have been, as if someone had removed it, or never bothered to give it one. It leaned closer, its head tilted unnaturally, bones or something like bones cracking beneath invisible skin, and it spoke. You carry it now, not a curse, not a threat, just ... fact. It leaves when you forget, it returns ... when you remember. The thing straightened, slowly dissolving into the shadows like steam fading into cold air. And then, as sudden as it began, the room was empty. The suffocating weight lifted, but only partially. Enough to breathe, enough to move, but not enough to believe I was ever truly alone again. I staggered back into the main room, the diary, both of them clutched against my chest. My mouth tasted of copper. My ears rang with silence. The house was still, but inside me, something else wasn't. Something had followed me out. The fear that stirs. I stumbled out of the cabin into the brittle night air. The wind bit at my skin, but it was a welcome pain, a reminder that something real still existed, that there was still a world beyond what I'd just witnessed. But even as my feet crushed the gravel beneath me, even as the cabin shrank into the distance behind me, the feeling didn't leave. It followed. No footsteps, no whispers, no shadows, just presence. Heavy, constant, invisible. I dared glance at the diary clutched in my arms. The older one, the one bound in whatever that was, felt warmer now, throbbing, pulsing, faintly like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Back in my car, I locked the doors, as if a lock could stop this. My hands trembled as I shoved the diary into the passenger seat, daring not to look at it any longer than necessary. But the moment my eyes left it, something shifted in the mirror. I froze, a shape small, curled, sitting in the back seat. When I whipped around, nothing, but the air was colder back there. I drove faster than I should have, but the road felt endless. Like the more distance I tried to put between myself and the cabin, the longer the road stretched, as though reality itself resisted my escape. I thought getting home would bring relief, safety, sanity. It didn't. Because when I stepped inside, nothing felt right. The shadows in the corners were too thick. The silence was too complete. And then I noticed the marble dot sitting on my hallway floor, right where there was no reason for it to be. Perfect, pristine. Waiting, my throat tightened as I scanned the room. The porcelain figure, the one that had turned its face away in the cabin. It was here, sitting on my shelf, head still turned. The diary lay heavy on my table, pages unmoving, silent, but the feeling, oh God, the feeling, it didn't leave. And then the message returned, not spoken aloud, but stitched into the folds of my mind, like something whispered between thoughts. It lives where you look. It wakes when you remember. It stays as long as you fear. I tried to sleep that night. I really did, but the shadows shifted whenever my eyes closed. Soft breaths grazed my ears. Gentle, but intentional. Like someone leaning close enough to make sure I knew. I am never alone again. And neither are you now. Because you've heard it. You've imagined it. You've pictured it. And that's all it ever needed. Could you sleep after hearing this? What do you think really happened? Was it real ... or something worse? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And, if you dare, explore another tale before bed. Just ... Try not to look behind you.